Okay. Um, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has a responsibility to acknowledge the historical context in which it exists in order to remind ourselves and our community. We will begin this event with the following statement. We are currently on the lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascouten, Odawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. It is necessary for us to acknowledge these Native nations and for us to work with them as we move forward as an institution. Over the next 150 years, we will be a vibrant community inclusive of all our differences with Native peoples at the core of our efforts. So I wanted us to start there because as we think of the journeys we take through this university and the journeys this university is allowing us to take, the panelists are going to talk about how their time at University of Illinois has helped them along their journey, I think. Maybe hindered. Who knows? We'll find out. So, a little bit about the Illinois Leadership Center. If this is your first event with us, we are located in the Illini Union, and our goal is really to make sure that no matter what discipline, no matter what major or college, no matter what organizations you're a part of, that all students have access to the skills they need to become more effective leaders. We started about 25 years ago, actually through activism by students who went to this experience called the Leadership Institute, where 60 students get to go to Allerton Mansion for a week over winter break and learn more about their own leadership development, their philosophy of leaders, what are the skills they need to be the leaders they want to be. These students came back and asked on a campus this huge, why do only 60 students get to be better leaders? Why can't all students? So they worked with faculty, staff, administrators to create not only our center, but also the Illinois model of leadership. So this model is what the University of Illinois hopes that all students who go through our university, these are the skills that they incorporate when they practice leadership. So you can look on our website more about the different skills and things like that. The two takeaways um, I want us all to keep in mind are one, when we talk about leadership, we are not necessarily talking about leadership as a personality trait where some people are naturally leaders, so others are not leaders. We're not going to talk about leadership as necessarily a position or a role where some people are hired, elected, promoted, appointed into leadership, and thus others are not. We were talking about leadership as a set of skills. So anyone who has the opportunity to learn and practice these skills are practicing leadership. And then second, you see our little tornado of leadership. We believe that leadership begins with ourself. The more we understand our own values, our goals, our behaviors, the more open we are when we work in our teams and different people that we meet, the more effective we become in our organizations, and thus the better leaders we become for our communities and societies. So these are the two ideas to buy into for the next hour and a half. And then after that, make your own decisions about what leadership means to you. We have programs. This is one of them. We also have workshops. We have a certificate in leadership. So please check us out. And all of our programs are free to students, thanks to our lovely donors, one of whom is on the call today. And you can connect with us. That's fun. So I am now going to get us started with, if I can pull up the right email. Um, so I want to get us started with welcoming our panelists today. So today we have Robin. I'm realizing I haven't pronounced everyone's last names. Robin Evitz, advisory partner at Reach Partners. Tina Gregory, CFO at Vision Companies. Mark Hoos, VP of Global Tax at NVIDIA. and Robert David, who will be our moderator and is executive director at CSHRP. So in this session, we're going to ignite dialogue, foster connections, and pave the way for your own success in the ever-evolving, ever-changing landscape of Silicon Valley and beyond. So we're going to get started now. I will pass it over to Robert.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you to the ILC, and looking forward to great discussions. Welcome, students. We have about 45 minutes for the panel, and then we will spend about 20 minutes for 4 breakout rooms, with each of the panelists and myself leading a breakout room. Feel free to put questions in chat. I have some prepared questions for our panel, but again, we definitely want to make this as interactive as possible for all the students on the call. Let's kick things off, and we'll get started with Tina here. Can you share your journey from college to your current leadership position in Silicon Valley? What were some of the pivotal moments or decisions along that way?
Thank you, Robert, and thank you everyone for joining. Yes, certainly, and U of I has played and continues to play a pivotal role in what I've been able to accomplish and what I've been able to experience. So I graduated from the U of I in 1982 and had a wonderful job offer, which was rescinded because there was a recession. So I learned resilience. And as Joy pointed out in the tornado, I also learned that being a leader does not always come by virtue of having leadership skills, but being able to empower others. So I've worked in, I took a job in credit management. I leveraged that job up into a role with a very innovative manufacturing company, continuous casting and aluminum, and then worked for a software company. I started and run 2 businesses on my own, and now I advise entrepreneurial startups and small businesses on a regular basis. So I think the most important thing that I learned from U of I, again, from the tornado, is if you empower others, then you will achieve your vision. And that means, empowering everyone from the manufacturing floor. I taught, continuous improvement and statistical process control at the manufacturing facility. And the key there was everyone is accountable and everyone is a critical member of the team. So I'm grateful for that experience. I think the most important things to remember about leadership are to be resilient, to be a continuous learner, and have a scientific mindset. And I'll turn it back over to you, Robert.
Great. Mark, same question.
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all today. So I grew up on a farm not far from Champaign, about 45 minutes, I guess, to the east, and went to Illinois and studied accounting and got out, worked for one of the big 4 accounting firms right away. I decided to go back to law school in DC. And after that, worked a little bit for one of the big law firms, then some of the accounting firms. And then from there, about 25 years ago now, I moved to in-house tax roles. So I'm currently an in-house tax person working for a large corporation out here in Silicon Valley. And so obviously what I learned at Illinois has always been very useful. Everything I know about accounting, I learned at Illinois, that's for sure. And it's very useful in what I do right now. And so it's been very helpful to my career.
Good, thanks. And Robin.
Good morning, everybody, or maybe good afternoon, I guess. We're 2 hours earlier here in California, but like Mark, I graduated with a degree in accounting in 1987. I too went into what it was then the Big 8. I guess now it's the Final 4, and we're in that season anyway. But I worked for Touche Ross, which obviously became part of Deloitte. And I found that extending my learning from Illinois, I knew a lot of accounting. I passed the exam right away, but I learned a lot more as I started working for the accounting firm. And it was great because I got to see a lot of things. I got to see a lot of different companies. I got to work with a lot of different teams. And every year we would learn something new. So it was great training. I worked in 3 different offices at Deloitte. Started my career in Chicago, then in Dallas, now in the West Coast. And then I also moved to different functions. So it was a great training ground, not only to learn things, but also to change jobs without actually changing firms. That then set me up for a job at Clorox. So I had been doing some work for Clorox as my client, but I left the firm to go work there. And I was the chief audit executive until I apparently asked too many good questions about IT, and then I became the CIO. And my job was to make it cheaper and faster, which I think is the job of every CIO. But I then, after I did that, I then leveraged that back into consulting about the finance of IT. Because lots of CIOs spend lots of money, but sometimes they have a hard time explaining where that money is going. So they need a good finance person. And then ultimately I left that and I went into a new industry, leveraging my accounting and finance background to be the interim CFO for a senior living organization, which turned a 4-month assignment into a 4-year assignment because COVID fell in the middle. And so, like Tina said, this is a story of bridging your experience, taking what you learn in one place and leveraging it to the next thing. I can say that pretty much most of the jobs I've had, I've never had them before. So it's not like I went and did one job and then I went and did it again. I just did something different, but I always was bringing something with me that I learned, which is sort of our training from Illinois. So it's been a great career of bridging and learning all at the same time.
Great. Thanks, Robin. Speaking of bridging to that cone, the snow cone from ILC, we'll start with Mark on this question. What leadership qualities do you believe are most critical for success in Silicon Valley? And if you've developed these skills over time, maybe you could explain, because everybody knows about, was it break often and go fast, whatever Zuck would say, but I think a lot of times, a lot of companies go a little bit slower and are more successful in the long run. Please.
Yeah, it's a good question. The Silicon Valley, I would say, is not a monolith, right? There are differing industries within Silicon Valley, and I've worked for some of them. I've worked for a couple of hardware companies, a medical device company, but obviously there are software companies which are obviously have different cultures as well. But there are a lot of commonalities, and the culture, the corporate culture here is, I think, significantly different than it is in other parts of the country. I've worked. I just grew up in Illinois, and I've worked in the Midwest, and the East Coast, and in Texas, in the oil and gas industry in particular. And the culture was way different. The favorite story I tell is when I left an oil and gas company in 2008 and went to a semiconductor company here in Northern California. I went from wearing a suit and tie every day and having a desktop computer to walking into a room full of people wearing jeans and hoodies and working and typing on their laptops while they're actually in a conference, right? They're supposed to be in a meeting. No one's listening to the meeting. They're all typing on their screens and looking at the computer. And so that was a major culture shift in pretty much in one day. And so I think in order to be successful in these cultures, probably the number one thing is flexibility, the ability to pivot quickly and also to figure out what's going on, right? Because these companies are not as structured in general. There's not the same amount of formal communication as you might find certainly in a governmental or other type of organization. And so you need to tap into networks so you can figure out which way the organization is moving and be flexible and adapt. And then always be thinking about what your next step's going to be. Always be thinking about the things you should be worrying about. And so that's what I would say high level are probably the skills that you really have to develop to be a leader here.
Great. Robin, same question.
Yeah, I guess I would say, a lot of my leadership training was on the job. When I was a partner at Deloitte, for example, I worked with a lot of people, but I didn't have a lot of people who directly worked for me. And so when I think of leadership, I also think of leading a team. And so my training was when I became the CIO at Clorox. I had 400 people that worked for me. It was the second largest function in the whole company behind the supply chain folks. And so I remember first thinking, oh my gosh, the drama, 400 people that I have to make sure come motivated to work every day and all get along. Even though my job is the CIO, it's really a people job. And so the compounding factor was that, as I said, it was too slow and it cost too much. And so one of the strategies that had been floated, which we ultimately took advantage of, was an outsourcing strategy. So we ended up having 400 people at the start and 125 at the end of my tenure there, with about 25 people going over to our outsourced firm, which was HP at the time. And so one of the things I learned was that sometimes you have to make a lot of decisions with not a lot of information. And some people like doing that, and some people hate it. And I'm a firstborn kid, and so I like following rules. My family teases me about it, but it's sort of hard sometimes with that general way of being in the world to make decisions when you don't have all the information and you don't want to make a mistake. Nobody really said too much about my journey in this role in my family until at one point my mom said, "You know, Robin, you're dealing with people's lives." And I said, "Yeah, thanks a lot, Mom. I know that." But I think you learn how to be yourself, honestly, because when it comes down to it, when you're in a lot of pressure, you just have to lead in the best way you know how. So, number one, there's no rule book. And number two, there has not been a test that you've passed to get these assignments. You do good work, and people think you can take on more good work. And that's how you aspire to your leadership roles. But the key is to leverage the skills you have, know which ones you don't have, leverage other people for those skills that to round you out and make sure you're not trying to be everything to everybody all the time. And so you really have to know yourself and engage other people for their strengths. And I guess the hallmark of my leadership through that, because at one point somebody says, "Well, if these people are leaving, they may sabotage the computers." And I said, "Yes, that's true, but we have to treat them with dignity and respect. We need them to be here and be productive through this journey." And so I was straightforward. We were transparent. We told people what was going to happen. We helped the people that were leaving land well. And so at the end of the day, I think, you go back to your values, you go back to treating people in the right way. I think Tina talked about empowering earlier, and I think you do need to try to empower and inspire the people that work for you. But those are things that you sort of learn when you're in the situation and have to make decisions. You sort of fall back to your principles to make those. So I've learned them through the journey, but it was learning from others along the way as well.
Great. And Tina, what leadership qualities do you believe are most critical for success in Silicon Valley here?
I think my cohorts did a fabulous job on marking them. Being able to pivot quickly is important because you don't always have the data that you need to make a decision or take the time to make the right decision. So in order to pivot quickly, like Mark said, you also have to have empowered others, like Robin said, because they will help you in those periods of time where you may not have all the data. They've got the insight. They may have a second way of looking at something. So I think the things that the qualities that are going to be most critical will be always assuming a teaching mode that helps you empower your team. So teaching and coaching are important. And I can't emphasize enough, obviously knowing the basic business dynamics. Accounting is the language of business. Make sure you at least understand it and know how to communicate well inside of that. And then always be learning so that you can empower the team. Because when organizations get large, as Robin said, or as Mark said, when organizations get large, you can't manage 400 people or even 100 people. And when they're transitioning in or out of an organization, you're going to have to rely on your team to do that. So what I find really invaluable and has always been invaluable to me are really strong communication skills, not just talking skills, but communication skills, being able to outline the vision for the company, the vision for the team, being able to tell folks how important they are to achieving that mission. These are critical elements.
So we have 37 students on the phone and nobody has their camera on. I would love for people to come off of the black box. We want to make this a discussion and it's hard to talk to just a name. We'd love to see your smiling faces. So please come on off. There you go. Thank you, Vahid. Okay. Nicole. Come on, students, you guys could do it. Daria. All right. Daniel, welcome. This is great. This is going to feel much more like a conversation. It's like you wouldn't want to go into a job interview without your camera on. So here we are. Okay, we have about half the folks, and the other half are walking across campus or somewhere on the quad. There we go. Madeline, thank you. The other thing that I would urge you to do is, I mean, what do you think? What leadership qualities do you believe are most critical? Why don't you just put it in chat? We'd love to see some of the responses. And again, we'll be able to play off of some of the questions that you have and some of the answers you have there. So feel free to put it in chat. What leadership qualities do you believe are most critical? And for those of you not yet on camera, please join us. And I think Joy will handle all the muting here. Okay, thanks so much. So we're going to move on to a question for Robin. What strategies do you recommend for someone looking to accelerate their career path from an entry level to first level leadership positions? So again, I think most of the people on the call are undergraduate students. I think we have about 10% are graduate students. They're all going to have summer internships and, you know, might lead to potentially a full-time gig or for full-time role. So what strategies do you recommend for folks to accelerate their career path, Robin?
Yeah, I guess I would say the one thing that I've thought about on this one is that you have to be good at something. You know, when you're new, you're trying to kind of bridge from your college studies and move into the workforce. And so you come with a certain set of skills. And it's not to say that you need to pigeonhole yourself at all. You know, I was an accounting major and I went into the accounting firms. But there's ways to be more general and have a smorgasbord of things that you work on. And that's good from an opportunity point of view. But I think as you're really trying to move up in those early days, it's all about being good at something. So is there an industry that you can focus on and really know well? Is there a particular part of the business? Is it the supply chain? Is it the finance organization? Is it HR? Something that you kind of know inside and out and you're really good at your subject. And so the key is that you get known for it. Because then when people know you for something, then they say, hey, I need someone to do X and you're good at X. And so they, you know, they pick you for that. So I think it's good to be collecting skills, but it's important early days to be good at something that then, as we talked about earlier, you can bridge. And yet I think you have to be open and flexible. So again, when I was the head of internal audit, then someone said, guess what, you're going to be the CIO. You thought, how did that happen? We had Fortran classes back in the day when I was in Illinois, but I'd never had an IT job before. So I think it is good to be open because things will come your way that you didn't naturally plan. I don't think Tina, Mark, or I would have said if you told us up front, is this the exact career path we would have, that we were like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I planned on doing. So you have to be open, but I think you need to be good at something. So pick something good to be good at.
That's some great advice. Tina, same question.
Yeah, I think as piling on with Robin there, take the initiative. Okay, you're not always going to be the one that has all the facts or all the experience, honestly. And embrace continuous learning. Take it as an opportunity. Obviously, you need, as she said, you need to know what you're good at and maybe where you have some weaknesses that you need to develop or rely on others for. But take that initiative, right? When I went to the manufacturing job, right, I had to teach everybody from the plant floor to the executive suite, and I do mean the board of directors there for a public company. Statistical process control, the importance of that. Had I done that ever before? No. Was I able to build on that going forward? Yes, but I relied on others and I relied on the skill set that I had from the university, the good training I had from professors and their support. So take the initiative, build your core skills, invest in your continuous learning. During the time I was working, I did pursue an MBA from Case Western as well. Everyone told me along the lines, you'll never be able to do that, you know, full-time work, going to school in the evening. It's going to take you 5 years. Yeah, it took me 5 years. But during that time, I learned the entire way through, and I was able to apply those skills as well and build on my foundation from U of I. And then I think the last thing I would mention besides those is, you know, you're going to hear a lot of things about, oh, find a mentor, network. Those are great suggestions, but not all of us have that. I'll be honest with you, I never had a mentor throughout my entire career. So I relied on good folks, Robin, Robert, people like Mark, that in the jobs and stuff that I took on, were willing to make an investment in me, but I had to prove to them all along the way that I was worth that investment. Okay, so don't be discouraged. Don't always, rely on the mentor or the network. Rely on the skills that you develop and build, and your capability to continuously learn.
Excellent. Mark?
Yeah, that was a great answer. So I get this question a lot. So I give you some more practical advice. Usually what people come to me with is like, I want to be promoted, right? That's always what they're talking about all the time. And so my advice on that is you have to understand whatever organization you're in and what the levels mean. So if you're in an accounting firm and you're entry level, what is the next level? Senior, then manager, then senior manager, director, partner. What are those levels and what do those jobs do? And what does it really take to do those jobs? And how long does it take to get there? The same within a corporate environment. We have analyst, senior analyst, manager, senior manager. What does it take to get to those roles? And then always be thinking about that. So you can't just say amorphously, I want to be promoted. You've got to figure out how the structure works. Every organization has one. They're all slightly different. But in general, particularly within a corporate world, what you're looking for when you want to move up a level is you're probably going to have what we call a greater scope of work, right? So when you're lower level, you're doing one thing. The higher you get up, the more you do. So, my example, I have the entire tax department, right? So anything called tax falls under me, but then I have certain people below me who do only international tax or sales and use tax and whatever. So the further up you go, the more scope you get. And so one thing you can do early in your career is think about those broader things, because that'll be a leadership skill or characteristic, is having more scope. So that's probably the most important thing. And then the other thing is to then, at least at where I work now, convince people at the level you want to go to that you're somebody who can be at that level. Right. So if you can go out, so for example, if you want to be a senior analyst, go find another senior analyst who says, yes, I think this person is a senior analyst. And these are the reasons why. I've seen them work. They're really high quality, that they show good capacity. They have great communication skills, whatever it is. So building that sideways network and picking up the scope are really kind of the critical elements to at least to getting promoted in the short term.
Right. We'd have a whole nother discussion on is a tariff attacks. He would be the expert.
Yeah.
We'll save that for another day.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Just by show of hands, this is our second annual. We had our first annual last year. Did anybody on the call today, were they part of it last year when we had 3 of HR leaders from Silicon Valley? Anybody on that call? No. But one of the big changes in Silicon Valley is sort of the move from titles to skills. So it's, again, less about the title, but really about what skills you have taken on. Another idea is if you do get a job in anywhere, not just in Silicon Valley, but there are these things called ERGs, employee resource groups, and volunteering and being part of those ERGs is a good way to meet other folks within an organization and just build up that internal network and become, part of those groups. So moving on, we did have a question from Ashley, and let's get to that. It says, how do you prioritize and identify what to learn? So we'll get started with Robin, Tina, and Mark. Maybe answer this question before we move on to some of our other questions. Oh, Robin,
Yeah,
there you go.
I was going to say, I think Mark touched on some of these things. I think, if you're trying to broaden your scope, if you're trying to navigate through the organization, you have to look at what does the next job that you want do, and what are the skills you think you bring to it, and where are the areas that you think you need to improve. And sometimes you don't have to be exactly like the last person. I think that's the beauty of sort of how the world has changed. It used to be that to be promoted, you had to be sort of a mini me of the person above you. But right now, I think it's more of a career lattice than it is a ladder. And so I think, there's a possibility to, move sideways as opposed to always up, or, maybe do it slightly differently. But I would say that the best clue is to sort of look at what is the job that you want? What do you think you bring to it? And where do you think you need to add to your skills to round out so that you can deliver on that?
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I think take a deep look at what you're passionate or interested about, right? And it may not be in the job that you're currently doing, right? So I told you I started manufacturing. Well, I'm now working extensively in blockchain and cryptocurrency, which, you know, that's miles apart, but not really. So look at what you're interested in knowing more about and in learning more about, because if you're impassioned about what you're interested in, you'll bring that passion to the job, and you'll be able to take the initiative, like we said before, and work with others and convince others that you are energetic, interested, passionate, and that goes a very long way for being able to say, what should I study? What will I be good at? And what can I accomplish?
Actually, I'm going to change route a little bit here. So the four of us all graduated in the 80s. And when we came out to Silicon Valley in the 80s, it was basically Apple Computer and HP. It was the culture of Silicon Valley. And in the 90s, it became Sun Microsystems and Cisco. And then the Zeds, it became Zynga and Facebook. And now it's the age of NVIDIA and AI. So how has the culture of Silicon Valley evolved over the years? And what should the students on the call today know about thriving in this environment? Because some are in business, some are in engineering, some are in LAS, some are in ag. So across the board, I think we have everybody at ILC, not just in one major. Mark?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I moved here in the mid 90s, and so right before the first wave of .com 1.0, and so had a chance to see it evolve a little bit. I think if anything, it's become even less structured. Right. It was always pretty famous for not being structured, and one of my former employers, Intel, was sort of the first one that set that tone. Right. No offices, everybody's in a cube, and all of that. But I think even since then, it has become, yeah, like I said, even less structured, where you are encouraged to be proactive. You're allowed to contact other people in the company. I mean, there are things that I do now that would have gotten me fired from an oil and gas job, right? I can basically reach out, contact, work with anybody else in other groups without having to check with my boss first or get permission to do those things. And so I think that's very useful, right? And that's encouraged in a lot of organizations. We form. We're often told your manager is just there for your performance review. We form teams to do activities, and then when the activity is over, we break up the team and then move on and do something else. So that's why, again, I say that the ability to be flexible and to work with all kinds of different people is really, really key. And also the ability to speak up, right? Because if you're in one of those kind of environments where it doesn't matter what level you are, that people are looking for a contribution from you, it's really critical to be able to offer that contribution. So that's how I would say is evolved, but also communication tools. I mean, some companies are very email dependent. Some use Slack. Some places people will text you all the time or hit you on Teams chat. But that's probably the other thing. The communication is now constant, as you can probably imagine, right? First thing in the morning until late at night. It really never stops. And that's a bit of a development, right? It was not obviously not the case in the 90s or even the early 2000s until Wi-Fi really took off, beginning around 2003. And then obviously the iPhone, BlackBerry first, and iPhone in 2007 or so. But it is now constant. And that's just something I think you have to get used to, right? The expectation on these companies is that really that you are on pretty much all the time. I mean, even on vacations, at least checking in maybe once or twice a day. So that's been a change for the better, or for the worse. It's hard to say. There maybe the worst because you can never break away, but the better is you can do it from anywhere, right? So you can travel back to Illinois to visit your family and still be connected, which maybe is not such a bad thing.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think the average right now in Silicon Valley, according to a professor at Stanford, is 3 days in the office. It seems like most Bay Area companies, some have gone back to 5 days in the office, some are fully remote, work from home, but I'd say the average is about 3 days. So Robin, same question. How has the culture of Silicon Valley changed over the years from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess just building on sort of the current line of discussion, I think with remote work, it's harder to build teamwork. You have more technology platforms and other ways to do it. And I think that teams are more dispersed. So you can take advantage of capability more broadly from anywhere. So I think all of those are good things. But I think the practical side of we're humans, and there's a way that we interact when we're in person that's different than when we're remote. And so I know as a leader, I had a team pre-pandemic that was always in the office 100% of the time. The CEO did not like anyone working remotely. And then, of course, the office had to close. So then everyone couldn't work. So we were all working remotely. Well, at some points, once a month, we thought like, hey, we should get together. Let's have lunch. Let's kind of have a team meeting. Let's go through where we're working and things to do. It was really hard as the leader of that team to get people to come to the office. People would say, oh, I take my daughter to her job at 3 o'clock now. Oh, I have, this other thing that I'm now doing since I've been able to work from home. And so, on the one hand, it's positive that we have more flexibility. On the other side, it makes getting us all together at the same time even harder. So there's that. I also think when I was early days in my career, I was just focused on my career. Like I worked all the time. There was a bit of hazing. You left 10 minutes after the partner left because, that's just the way you did it. I worked for a senior manager that had a game in the afternoon. You got 1 point for guessing the song, 2 points for knowing the song and the artist. And whoever lost had to go buy the afternoon milkshakes or something. So like there was some scheme around that because everybody was really kind of focused on career and whatever it took to sort of be in that groove. And that I think is different now. Again, for the good, it's important that people have lives and they're well balanced and that work has its right place. But just even what is the operating norm then? Like, what is it that we're all committing together when we work here to do? It's hard to figure out. So I encourage people to sort of watch what everyone else does, take the good of it and try to eliminate some part of the downside of it. As Mark said, being on call all the time. On the one hand, it's nice that you can sort of tap in and do these things. On the other hand, you sort of have to protect yourself. So I think the culture has changed in that, it's more individually based and yet we still have to work in teams. So I think that's sort of the challenge.
Great. Hey, Tina, would you like to take one of the two questions that got put into chat here?
Yeah, the importance of advanced degrees. So
Yeah.
I think there's two things I'll take that one as a start. And it's a great question, by the way. These questions are amazing, so keep them coming. But I think it is important to understand, as I said before, what you want to do. Do have a plan of what you want to accomplish, but be ready to pivot on it, right, when an opportunity presents. So I think it is important if you're looking at getting an advanced degree to get one in an area that you want to learn more about, not that you're already really good at, right? So I think it's important to work in between get some work experience before you go back and get an advanced degree like an MBA, and make sure on that MBA it's interdisciplinary, right? So it's an accredited school, something like U of I. Of course, I'm going to be biased on that, or be biased on Case Western where I got mine. Try to get your advanced degree from a different university because, again, you're going to get that diversity of experience. And really focus, I think, on interdisciplinary, right? So if you're a terrific accountant or a terrific engineer, have the engineer doing some learn some accounting work or learn some production operations. If you're a marketing person, I think that's critically important. As Robert said, the interdisciplinary group that we have here is a perfect example. You're a microcosm of what you're going to see in Silicon Valley. And the big difference I've seen is when I first got here 20 plus years ago, we still had that hierarchy, right? This person is in the tax department. This person is in the manufacturing department. This person's in procurement. Now we've got folks that are all across the spectrum, right? So whereas I worked as a CFO for a public company in Bitcoin. So whereas my job might have been, traditionally in the CFO office, just managing the reporting, the SEC, all that stuff. No, we were involved in operations. We were involved in engineering, in information technology. So make sure when you get that advanced degree, you're doing something that you're impassioned about, that is interdisciplinary, and that will help you learn something that you don't already, master.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to have Mark, since you work in NVIDIA, this question about AI with the rapid advancement. Do you see that question?
I do not.
From Daria, I'll read it to you. It says, with
Okay.
the rapid advancement of AI, what is the current dynamic you're seeing in the tech industry, especially in terms of impact on jobs, probably especially impact on entry-level jobs? Should we be worried about job loss, or do you see it as creating new opportunities?
Yeah, there's been a lot of research on this recently, so I'll limit myself to what I've read on the research. It seems like AI right now anyway is hitting jobs that are very kind of narrow and well defined, where the task is narrow and well defined. So for example, a writer or a coder, right? The thing it can't do, at least not yet, is do what we do as professionals, which is pull together multiple streams of information and try to make sense of them, right? In the tax department, I've got financial data, but I also have the tax law. I also have audit activity from an auditor. I've got my own PwC auditor, right? I've all these flows of information I've got to try to pull together and make sense of. AI can't do that yet, but it can do very discernible tasks like write, as you all probably know, write an essay, write a research paper, do some coding. So I think, unfortunately, for people in those areas, it may be a job risk for writers, for coders, and whatnot. Whether it gets past there or not, that's the real question, right? It doesn't really get past that. Haven't really seen it yet. It's certainly possible it'll develop into that, but we haven't seen it yet. The other thing I'll say is it's not great with numbers, at least not yet, right? Most of what it does is text based. That's why the writers are the ones that are being hit probably the most right now, are graphic artists where it can produce graphics. But it hasn't really hit with numbers, at least that I've seen. And so that's kind of where we are. We may be on the precipice of something, but right now it's been a fairly limited impact, I think. And you see that in the job numbers, right? It hasn't really, it doesn't show up in the job figures yet as being hugely impactful to employment in the US.
Right. There's a great question. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Simasola, is that correct? Yeah, good. As a leader, and we'll start with you, Tina, on this one. As a leader, has there ever been a time when you felt overlooked, sidelined, or disrespected in a professional setting? And how are you still able to adapt and show your leadership skills? So I think all four of us could probably answer this one. We'll start
That's
with
never
you.
happened to me.
Yeah, never
Never.
happened. Happened to all of us multiple times in a 30, 40-year career. Go ahead, Tina.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. And thank you. Yeah, it's happened to all of us. And I think the answer to that is, you have to maintain your true voice and and remember, being ethical and respectful in all of your communications, standing your ground, because, there have been multiple challenges during, my long career where, yes, I have felt disrespected, unheard, but ignored, even when, I'm like, this is going to come and hit you, right? But I think if you are, you have to practice being ethical, maintaining, who you are as a person, right? And it's a slippery slope when you're like, well, it won't matter in this instance. When you are a leader and you are able to have that actual authentic presence, in most cases, two things will happen, right? Folks will come to see who you are, what you stand for, and that movement will come back to you. The other one is that I just got to be honest with you, there may not be a fit. And then but if there's not a fit, then it's time for both parties to move on, right? So I've been in both of those situations, and the most important advice I can give you is always be ethical, do the right thing. Sorry, Spike, but do the right thing and always maintain your true voice and your true person.
Great. Robin? Same
Yeah,
question?
I mean, I agree with Tina. I mean, whether it's I was overlooked for a promotion or there were several circumstances where it was a sort of a male-female dynamic when, male colleagues would say things and you're just like, what? And I can picture one in my mind in particular where some gentleman thought I should basically sit on his lap at a board meeting because I was looking for a chair to sit down, and he told me he could, sit on his lap. And so, I think you have to sort of consider the source. And as Tina said, you just sort of work through it. And so if this was in Texas, and I just said, in a very nice way, oh no, I think I found another seat. And so I think it is about your character, and, it's work. It is not your family. I think that's the other part to remember. I had a lot of friends at work because I spent a lot of my life at work. And so when these things happen at work, you're sort of crushed because it's a lot of your universe. And so I think you do have to keep it in perspective. It's not my health. It's not my family. They do pay me to come to work here. And I have a choice. I can either keep working here or I can find something else to go do. And so I think if you can keep it in perspective and not allow it to define you, because, you know, people have different perspectives and they may not see your brilliance, but, you know, too bad for them, you know, use it somewhere else. And so I just think the more you can sort of roll with that, you know, if it's a pattern, definitely, you know, some people need to intervene, whatever. But I think you just have to sort of consider the situation, be strong in your own presence, and work through it.
Great. And Mark?
Yeah, I think that's great advice, right? It's just money, right? It's just a job. You got to keep that in mind, have that perspective. But also, it helps to depersonalize, so focus on the issue, not on the people, which is really hard to do. And I would also encourage all of you to develop that skill, that toughness. One thing I did was I've taught a lot as an adjunct professor, and I was actually a full-time law professor for about a year and a half a few years ago. And teaching will toughen you up. You get your performance reviews back, and there's always two students in the class who think you're the biggest idiot who's ever lived, right? There's probably a couple of you on the Zoom right now who think that about me as well. So whenever you get more than 10 or 20 people together, you're going to find that's the case. And so it's certainly that way when you're a leader. If you get a team of more than 10 or 20 people, there's going to be a couple who think you're just the worst leader who ever existed. And so it's inevitable, right? You cannot please everybody. And so the sooner you learn that, the better you're going to be. And then again, the way to deal with those people, like Robin just described, is to depersonalize it, like she did. It's like, I found another chair. This isn't about you. It's about the topic. I found another chair. And so it's the same thing with anything performance related or work related. Focus on whatever the dispute is on the work item, and leave the personal stuff aside.
Great. Thank you. We're going to move on a little bit. I'm going to skip a question, Joy, and move on to Tina here. Just by show of hands, are there any entrepreneurs on the call today? Or do you consider yourself entrepreneurial? Anybody? Okay, 1, 2, 3. So we have a few folks, but for students interested in entrepreneurship, what are the most common mistakes early founders make, and how could they avoid them? Tina?
Yeah, this is my favorite question of all time. Thank you, Robert, for the ability to answer it or provide some perspective. So I've been working for, I'll just admit to 20 years, but it's longer than that. Working with entrepreneurs, with venture capitalists, angel investors, larger investors, corporate investors, to build businesses and scale businesses. These are entrepreneurial businesses for the most part. And there are a couple of things that I see that are mistakes that are sometimes once made are insurmountable, and other times if caught early, they can be fixed. So the first one is I see a lot of this insufficient market research, right? Great ideas coming to the fore, but what I advise all of my clients that are entrepreneurial or founder-based companies, don't ask 4 people if this solution or your product, your good, your platform is going to, what it does. Ask 100, and those 100 people, and that's, I mean 100, but it can be, if you can get close to that, that's fine. Ask what they're missing, what pain point they have that's not been addressed, what they can't live without if they once had it, right? And you don't just ask your friends or the group that you hang around with. Ask potential competitors, ask potential folks that you'd like to market your product to. If you have an intergenerational group, an ERG, like Robert said, that you work with, ask them, where are your pain points? So I see insufficient market research, with a lot of development work done for a very specific market that really isn't as large as might have been determined at first. Talk to your potential customers if you've got a solution running and a POC. The second most frequent mistake I see is financial mismanagement, right? So burning through your money too quickly, having inadequate runway, not doing milestone fundraising, saying I need, I need 500,000 to develop to this point of concept. Well, I'm going to tell you, especially now, it's going to take you twice as much money and twice as long to get to that POC. So have that business plan. And I'm not self-promoting any of us here, but have a business plan. If you don't have one, get someone to help you with it. Make sure that you're managing the resources that you have well. That includes people. I think there's a lot of premature decision-making being done, building something too early, again, without understanding the market. There's the team matters, and for an entrepreneur. So you're not just going to hire your best friends, your college buddies, even though you've worked with them and you trust them. Sometimes you have to make really hard decisions down the road for a pivot. And what I mean by a pivot is you may start down the road developing some solution platform or solving a problem, and you might find, you know what, this is not going to take me where I need to go. I had a client that is now very successful, just getting ready for an IPO. Literally, you know, the classic Silicon Valley thing. We're sitting in a coffee shop in San Francisco, and he's showing me on his laptop what he's developed. And I said, this happened to be a cryptocurrency solution. I'm like, this is really intriguing, right? But he knew, he had advisors on his board that said, look, this is a great B2C solution, but you're going to make a ton of money on B2B. Instead of saying, this is my baby, I'm going to go with it the way I envisioned it, he took that advice. It's a very well-regarded B2B solution today. So, you know, sometimes you have to be ready for that pivot. Get insight from others, right? I know your idea is good. I understand it, but you don't have too much overconfidence in it. And then I think at some point, as you're getting ready to scale, leadership matters, right? You're the salesperson now for your company. You can't be that salesperson when you've got 500 customers, right? So you've got to build and empower the people on your team. When you empower them, they have the same goals that you do. When you point out the vision for them, they operate under that framework. They don't need a lot of guidance. So in summary, I hope that's helpful. Robert, did that answer the question?
It did. And there are other advice that I've given when I've been in venture capital is ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. You know, again, it's in how you position it and how you're able to basically meet with folks. But thanks, Tina. So we're in a little time machine here. So Robin, if you could go back to when you were first starting in your career, what is the one thing you would do differently? What's the advice we could give our students on the phone today?
Yeah, so we talked about this idea of bridging and kind of building your skills over a period of time. I think I would have been more intentional about each experience that I had and what I think I learned. Because people will say, "What's your brand? What are you good at?" And you're like, "I don't know. I just go into tough situations and I fix them." So I think, having some self-reflection along the way to say, maybe I didn't like how that exactly panned out, but I did learn something, and just sort of taking the time to sort of reflect on that. And then I guess I would just say, ultimately, I was glad to have the variety of experiences that I had, and being open, maybe not consciously at the time, but looking back on it, I met a lot of people. Have a big network. I was in IT, I was in internal audit, I was in finance. I've been in a number of different industries in 3 different cities. And so I've met a lot of people along the way, and I've had the chance to learn a lot of things. So I think if I were at the start, I would tell myself, don't try to be too narrow, because, it's fun to have these different experiences, because if you think about your life and you think about your time, the number one place you're spending your time is at work. So if you don't have fun doing it, that's not a very fun life. I remember heading down the freeway one time with my hands on the steering wheel thinking, oh my gosh, I'm late. And that little song, when the Wicked Witch is riding her bicycle in the Wizard of Oz, you're thinking, okay, if I can just get through my work career, I'll get to my life, was sort of what was going through my head. And then I realized, no, this is it. So at the end of the day, your work life is your life. It's part of your life. So make it an enjoyable experience. It is work. It is a 4-letter word. They do pay you. You don't pay them to come to work every day, but enjoy the journey.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, what Robin just said is really good advice, right? It's important to like what you're doing, or at least be able to tolerate it, because I don't think it's really possible to be very good at anything that you're not interested in, right? To force yourself to learn something that you really aren't interested in, you'll never really be that great at it. Which may be why I wasn't a very good accountant. It's certainly possible. So in any event, what else I would do would be to follow the advice I've been giving to you, which I didn't really do in my own career, which was to understand the structure of the organization you're in, what it takes to move up to the next level, and start building those relationships. Another thing is to obviously think about your boss. right, your manager, even in Silicon Valley companies now, where we say your manager doesn't matter and all of that, your manager still matters, right? And you can see in the research, most people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. And so make sure you have a good boss, that you have a good relationship with your boss, that your boss supports you. And the one thing you can do is always be thinking, how can I make my boss's life easier? Those are the employees I love the most, are the ones that come to me and say, what can I do for you? Or have you thought about this? Because a lot of times people assume I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, right? That's another thing in general. You should never assume that people above you have a clue as to what they're doing, because they really don't, right? And that's one thing that took a long time to learn as a young person. I just assumed everybody knew what they're doing. And every time I get on an airplane, I think about this. I hope those guys up there know what they're doing and they're not like everybody else I know in life. I assume they do. So keep that in mind. And again, just make your boss's life as easy as possible. And that would be the number one piece of advice I'd give.
Another thing, just again, now you have the benefit of LinkedIn. I mean, everybody should have a LinkedIn account. Everybody should basically, everybody on this call should link into each other, and again, building your network. Silicon Valley is definitely, it's sometimes not what you know, it's who you know. You've heard that before. It's a cliche, but it's true. There was one question before we go into breakout rooms, I'd love to answer from Timothy. And then we'll go into breakout rooms for about 20 minutes and then come back for 10 minutes to share what we've learned in the breakout rooms. But Timothy asks, how do you deal with conflicts of ideas among your peers in a professional setting? So, Mark, why don't you start with that? Then we'll go to Tina, then Robin.
Yeah, I smiled because we used to, and I think this would still be useful for companies to do. At Intel had great onboarding training, right? The best onboarding I've ever experienced. And one training they did there was called constructive confrontation, because they wanted, and you had to go through this as part of your onboarding to join the company. One thing they wanted people to do was to challenge, like I just said a few minutes ago, challenge your bosses. And it's really important in electrical engineering, right? Really important in physics, because just because someone's your boss doesn't mean they know the physics, right? The physics is the physics, and you can't manipulate reality like that. So constructive confrontation meant challenge, right? But then once you challenge, there's a concept of disagree and commit, right? So I challenge, we think about it, we work it through, but then ultimately a decision has to be made, and it's going to be kind of a collective decision, but ultimately there's a leader who's going to really be the one who decides. And once that happens, then everybody who is on the team, even if they disagreed, they commit to that conclusion and we all move forward. And having that kind of formal framework, I thought was incredibly useful, and is one great thing Intel did.
I agree 100%. It's legendary. Tina?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Mark. I think one of the most, if the company's not large enough as Intel was and smart enough to train on conflict management and effective team communication, then you have to do it yourself. And so, and you can do it yourself. And here's the key there. Active listening is going to be critical in dealing with potential peer conflict, and really getting a lot of good ideas on the table that will bring a team together, because that conflict can be it can engender a lot of teamwork as well, as long as it's handled the right way. So active listening, and what I mean by that is when someone says something that you take as a conflict, clarify. I just heard you say that, the way that I've constructed the team plan may have some flaws. Can you tell me a little bit more? Ask the questions. It's important to focus not on the person, as Robert and Robin and Mark said before, not on the person, but on the fact at hand, right? And in order to do that, to separate the person from the matter at hand, it's important to ask what is happening, right? And why is it important? Not about the person. So there's something wrong in my outline. Tell me more. What's happening? Why it's important? It's important because I don't want our team to fail, because we're great. So please take time to, and I know went very deep in the organizational behavior courses that I took. I hope they're still there. In active listening and effective communication and conflict management, critically important. If not, there's some great resources out there for emotional intelligence, EQ, that you'll definitely want to take a look at.
Great answer. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, I guess I would just say a couple of things. The first is, if you're a great leader, you create an environment where these debates of ideas can happen. And especially when it's a big, hairy, audacious choice, you want to make sure that you've heard all the different nooks and crannies of the different possibilities before you make a choice. Because you don't want to be that person that's like, everybody's walking around like, what an idiot. And so I think it's important to sort of create a place where you can have heard different points of view. The second is that often when people are debating or not agreeing, they're up what we used to call it Clorox, the ladder of inference, right? So there's certain facts that they gather to have their opinion that if you can get people to back down and tell me, well, what are you assuming? Or what outcome are you expecting? Or those kinds of questions, at a certain point, they actually agree. They just have a different fact set. And so it's important to get people's opinions back down to their logic so that if there is a difference, it's usually around the facts. And clearly, if you had different facts, you'd have a different answer. So how do you kind of deconstruct it that way? And then I guess the last part is that I feel like in some ways our society is getting to a place where everyone is supposed to agree all the time. And especially in business, like there's situations where one team's advice does not live in the same realm as the other team's advice. So, for example, when I was going through the outsourcing, I wanted to be very transparent. That's how I work. And so that's what I wanted to do. The HR team said, yes, you need to talk to the employees. The legal team said, no, don't tell the employees anything. And I'm exaggerating to make my point. But at some point, you know, I'd listen to both sides. And then as the leader, it's your job to say, I understand there's risks on either side, and I have to just decide what we're going to do. So I decided, and whoever didn't get their way, if you will, said, but Robin, you can't decide that because it doesn't agree with what I said to you. And I said, I know, but I can't reconcile your two different opinions. And so we're just going to have to agree to disagree. So I think at some point, you just have to feel like it's okay to be at a place where different people might choose differently, but you're the leader and it's your prerogative and you get to decide. But then, as Mark said, I expect everybody to get in line because we don't need to have an externally facing debate here. I heard the arguments both ways, and this is just what we're going to do.
Great, thank you. So three things. We've got about 32 students on the call. We're going to open up 4 breakout rooms. Each of the panel and myself will have a breakout room. Please do not drop off the Zoom. We really want to have you turn on your cameras. We want to get to know you better. And I think in groups of 8 per panelist and moderator, we could really get to do that because we'd like to learn from you and really make it a two-way discussion. So it doesn't feel so like, you know, sage on the stage, but really, you know, we're here to really help. So Joy is going to randomly assign us into rooms, and it's now 1:03. So we'll come back at about 1:18 as a group and then share some of what we've learned. So Joy, take it away from here. And we look forward to seeing you on the other side of the breakout rooms.
Sounds good. Opening rooms now. Okay, everyone should be coming back now.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. So now I would love for the students to put their leadership hat on. And feel free to raise your hand via the Zoom or just raise your hand like this and I could call on you. But maybe what you learned during the breakout session or what you learned during today's session to share with the group. So who wants to go first? Don't be bashful. Oh,
So I
Daria?
can go ahead.
Oh. Do you want to come off of mute, Daria?
Oh,
Great.
I didn't know that it is me, but of course. I feel just to be more respectful and ethical and the importance of the communication and how you should communicate with every team and coworker. That I think, yeah, was the point, was communication for me.
Thank you so much. Great. Who wants to go next? And Josh, did we meet in November when I think I have a picture with you.
Yes, we did. I believe so.
We did meet. Excellent.
Yep. And I would just say it's important to understand the structure of the organization and kind of what it takes to move up. I think that's something really important I learned today.
Thank you. Great. Nicole?
Yes. Something that Robin talked about that I really liked was similar to the Japanese concept of ikigai, where you kind of for whatever your role is, you want to balance like what your skills are, what your passion are, as well as what will pay you. And so I liked our discussion kind of about that and making sure you figure out and get experience in whatever role you're going to pursue, because you won't know if you actually like something until you're getting experience with it.
How true. Absolutely.
I think Ishan
Great.
had his hand up.
Yeah, Sean, yep.
Yeah, another really interesting thing that I heard was joining Illini Link, like the alumni network. I feel like there's a lot of valuable connections that you just kind of would make there. And it's like, as a student, being able to get mentorship or like advice, I feel like that would be really useful.
Anveshka? Anveshka? Am I pronouncing that correct? No.
Oh, try once again.
Anveshka?
Yes, bang on. So throughout this session, there were many takeaways, but for me, the key one was that just being competent isn't enough. You just have to make sure others know about it. And you can like portray yourself in a way that you get recognized. So you have to put yourself in a position where you are valued. And that is something which only you can do for yourself.
Well, well said. +1 on that. Heath?
So yeah, thank you all. I learned a lot. Something that really stood out was like thinking like your boss and trying to make their life easier in terms of what they want and just like acting upon that. So I thought like very helpful.
Think like a boss. Add value. Exactly. Anybody else? Maybe I'll just call on people.
I'll
Elijah.
share something.
Okay. Oh, okay. No, we'll go Elijah, then Ashley.
We talked a little bit kind of about the recognition that a couple other students had mentioned, but really kind of different ways to put yourself out there, make sure that you're portraying what the company got out of your work, like what the company received from whatever project you worked on or whatever activities that you did to showcase the value that you're bringing to the table.
And Elijah?
Yeah, I think I learned that it's like kind of a journey and you have to be willing to bridge across different positions. And sometimes you might start off lower, but even if you're not doing a management position, just being able to consistently show like that you're competent and that you're wanting to help others with their job can help you succeed.
Excellent. I agree 100%. Okay. Joy, do you have any final comments before we break off here and give people back a few minutes to their Saturday afternoon? Again, I think speaking on behalf of the panelists, all 4 of us will take your LinkedIn connection request. I'm sure you could find all of us. Be more than happy if there is a role or a job that I'm connected to a hiring manager. Again, I do that pretty much almost weekly from some alumni who reaches out to me, and I'm able to suggest that they contact a particular person. But anything else, Joy, that you'd like to add for today?
Yeah, first, I hope all the students can join me in thanking all of our panelists and you, Robert, for this great talk and getting to meet with you all. A few housekeeping things. One, I did try to get everyone's attendance, like you all checked in on One Illinois, and that's how I'll send you follow-up information as well as contact information. If you do not see yourself as checked in to One Illinois, please reach out to me in case the name did not match up with the name you registered with. We also have a survey, so please, I'm going to put this in the chat. Please, if you are able to, please fill out the survey so that we know how did it go? Was the questions relevant? Did the breakout rooms go well? What can we do to improve the program for next year? That's all of my announcements. So Robert, if you're good with
Great.
it.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Robin, for so much, and appreciate your time. And go Illini.
Go Illini.
Yeah. Thanks all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.